The gangster suddenly decided to take a shortcut home, but he unexpectedly ran into a police checkpoint.
Alto!
The officer politely asked him to show his identification. The man instinctively glanced at the officer's shoulder insignia. When he saw that the officer was a senior commander, he pretended to reach for his ID, but in reality, he pulled out something else. As the officers dropped to the ground, he did not immediately flee the scene. Instead, he got out of the car to make sure they were really dead. Now it was clear, he had deliberately changed his route, just to take the lives of those two officers, because killing police officers could earn a huge bounty from the cartel boss.
Sí, pero dos que, pues, sargentos oficiales, 1 millón cada uno.
That's right, the cartel boss Pablo had announced a nationwide bounty. Killing an ordinary police officer earned $2,000. A police captain earned $5,000. A superintendent earned $10,000. A commissioner earned $20,000. And killing a police chief would bring a reward of $50,000. The police never imagined that a profession once considered secure would become one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. Pablo perfectly exploited the resentment that poor people felt toward the government and the police, as well as their desperate desire for money. Back then, an average family could not even earn $500 in a whole year. So for money, people were willing to do anything. Within just a few days, there were so many bodies that the streets were overflowing with corpses. The police had no choice but to set up temporary morgues. So just how ruthless does a person have to be to do something like this to every police officer in the country? It turned out, Pablo had built enormous wealth through milk powder smuggling in his early years. He thought he could enjoy a peaceful life after moving to Panama. But once he arrived, he realized that in Panama he only had money, not the thrill that came with power. Only in his homeland of Colombia could he enjoy the ultimate combination of wealth and influence. To return home legally, he was willing to spend $12 billion and sent representatives to negotiate with the government. He knew that corruption was widespread among officials, and that the country's finances were already in ruins. So, his offer was to pay off the national debt in one lump sum, and use the remaining money to help develop the country's economy. A criminal organization paying off a nation's debt sounds like a joke, but the truth was, the Medellin Milk Powder Group controlled 80% of Colombia's import and export trade. No one in the country made more money than he did. Panama believed that he was bringing huge amounts of US dollars into the region through his milk powder business, and then using that money to boost the local economy, which they saw as a major contribution. The government negotiators were also tempted by the staggering offer of $12 billion. However, the key issue in the negotiations was the extradition treaty. The treaty had originally been proposed by the Americans. If it were abolished, it would directly harm American interests, and could easily lead to conflict between the two countries.
The extradition part is non-negotiable. We can't guarantee anything without the agreement of a North American partner.
Ah, the North American partner, the gringos. Who did then? This is a matter between Colombians.
As a result, the negotiations ended in failure. But without abolishing the extradition treaty, war became inevitable. The awkward reality was that whoever had the money usually held the advantage in war, and the government was unlikely to win. But in fact, starting a war was not easy for Pablo either. Once a war began, there would be no turning back. He did not really want to completely break with the government, because that would be terrible for business.
Nos podemos ir a otra parte. Se supone que Suiza es muy bonita.
En Suiza no somos nadie, Pablo. ¿Qué sirve tener toda la plata del mundo si no podemos estar en la casa?
Si no te regreso.
But when his wife heard about the possibility of war, she showed none of the fear one would expect. Instead, her gaze turned cold, and she slowly took his hand.
Haga lo que sea necesario, mi amor.
To be honest, that kind of encouragement was chilling. The very next day, Colombia was shaken by an event that shocked the world. Presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán was on his way to deliver a campaign speech. His campaign manager Gaviria was still trying to persuade him not to challenge the cartel.
Estaré en comando. Tengo un chaleco antibalas. Me temo que un chaleco no es lo suficiente como para garantizarle su futuro.
But Galán did not care, because support for the extradition treaty was the core of his campaign, and Gaviria's warning soon came true. Galán stepped onto the stage to overwhelming public support, but the moment he appeared, he was struck by a burst of fire from a Galil assault rifle. The bullets pierced his body armor, and he died on the spot. You can never imagine how many people were willing to become Pablo's loyal killers. When driven by fear and enormous rewards, Galán's death marked the failure of the government's fight against the Medellin Milk Powder Group, and plunged the entire nation into panic. Who would still dare to run for president after this? Yet fate can be strange. At Galán's memorial service, his son delivered a passionate and tragic speech.
Las balas de los asesinos no pondrán fin a lo que mi padre comenzó. Así como él cayó, hay otro que surge en su lugar. Le quiero decir, al doctor César Gaviria, en nombre del pueblo colombiano y de mi familia, confiamos los ideales de mi padre en sus manos y que cuenta con nuestro apoyo para convertirse en el presidente que Colombia quiere y necesita.
That's right. The person chosen to continue the fight was none other than Gaviria, the very man who had urged Galán not to oppose the cartel. Gaviria never imagined that he would be pushed into the spotlight himself. Running for president should have been a great honor, but he realized that accepting this responsibility was almost the same as signing his own death warrant. For a time, Gaviria found himself trapped in an impossible situation. If he continued to challenge Pablo and support the extradition treaty, he would likely suffer the same fate as Galen. But if he gave in to the cartel, he would betray the will of the people, and the country would fall completely under criminal control. What choice did he have left to make?